We've got a lot of history.
Yeah, it doesn't feel that long, um, but yeah, we actually have come quite a long ways. I was looking at my notes, and I was meditating on us and where we've come and where we've been way back in the Universal School of Music days. And I think intelligence is the ability to adapt. And I think working with you, we've looked at our community, we've looked at the terrain, what's on the ground. We look for the niches that can be filled. And I think that's one of the reasons I really enjoy working with you is because you're not static. You stay fluid based on, the terrain of the times.
So it's been about 7 years, I think, since we first caught up, and we had an interesting random interview. I remember that moment very
Yes,
clearly.
I do too. I was looking at that a couple weeks ago.
Yeah. Why don't we start with that? So, and how we sort of connected, and one of those, I think, some of the boxes that we both ticked at that time in that initial conversation around, you. Well, let's start with that. So you came from having taught at several institutions,
Yeah.
and looking for a new pathway, a new place, somewhere you could be a bit more Martin Case and not be, I think, restricted by some of the dogma and politics of the public system.
Yeah.
But why don't you tell us that story and how and that moment when we caught up initially about 7 years ago?
Okay. Yeah, it was, let's see, I've been here for about, I think, 8 or 9 years now in Australia. And I had one job here as a professor, and that was standard. You go in and you do your job and you do the curriculum, and you go home. And I'm always looking for places where all of the facets of my mind and all that kind of stuff can be utilized. And I remember saying to you years ago, feel free to exploit me on these issues. This is the skill set that I have. And I've had a great career. I was at Boston Ballet for 20 years. I was at Harvard for 20 years as a professional artist. But to be able to sit down with you and to say, okay, let's really look selflessly, at the people that we have coming through the door. Let's look at the gestalt of the times, which included a COVID pandemic and issues with our immediate society relative to social issues and collaboration. And I think one of the things that I found of interest meeting you was I saw um, resources that were malleable, so to speak. We have the gear here. Okay, that's great. We have the location here. We have the personnel here. But most importantly, dear Steve, I'm looking into your eyes saying this, is your ability to be malleable like that. And maybe that's the wrong word, but to just change your gears upon saying stuff. That's not common. And I've tried to say that to like my fellow producer Leon and others here. We had a vocalist here who was like in her early 20s, and you stopped a meeting and you said, "What is your opinion? What is your vision?" You let her speak, and then you repeated it back afterwards. And I pulled her aside afterwards and I said, I could easily be your dad, if not your dad's dad. And I don't know if you understand, that's not a normal situation to get that much acknowledgement. And your input will change how this institution moves if it's solvent. I always, and I said this in another interview about you and I, is you remind me of my venture cap colleagues, those that have helped me when I was younger. And they said, look, Martin, we like your mind. If you have a great idea, we'll actualize it. We'll get you the funding, resources, networks, and all that. Or we'll tell you where your idea is found wanting. And then now I'm fully armed and I can come to the table and bring ideas. And you let people have a little bit of time to think about things. The last time I did an interview, I said I wanted a jazz band, and you said no. And within 12 months of that interview, that was there. And do I have images of a reggae band, of a South American band, as I point to my good friend and colleague, of a death metal ensemble? And I can see in your eyes, you're right. You're like, no, it's too much. Right? But the seed's been placed, and we'll see. We'll see what happens down the pike. But it's made it so that me as an artist and as a producer, and now turning into a father figure, and the gray hair getting older, have been able to actualize visions, have been able to, with a lot of our psychology and philosophy and all that, heal people with love and light, show youth that it's not all boobies and hot dancing, that we, work to serve our community through our art. So you've ticked a lot of boxes here. This place is an anomaly. And I am on the mountaintop saying, this is the way to go if you want to teach, if you want to inspire, if you want to make, good leaders for tomorrow.
Cool. So let's go deeper into that partnership, because it really is, and this is the way that I've really seen collaborative environments. They're a partnership. I remember speaking with a lot of staff over the years, and you're right. It's a different approach. I've been the employee, I've been, the boss, I've been the co-worker, the musician, all sorts, and it just doesn't go forward in having a level of hierarchy that is not met and is not reciprocal as a partnership. So, for that reason, the only way forward for any organization, especially for startups, listening to this, is you really have to get people's, level of investment and get them invested in this thing. And in order to do that, they need to feel and know and see the results of their own work take shape. And so this is something we can talk about a bit more moving forward. But let's just jump back to the bands, because this is a big new, offering that we launched about 4.5 years ago. And we launched it, pretty much off the back of the Lions International Convention at the Convention Center, with our first debut performance there with our first band called the All Stars Band. So walk us through that, like, for those listening out there, walk us through that process of evolution, and how has that been for you?
Okay. I'm going to double back just for a second. Because you used the term boss, and I used to call you my boss. And you would have this visceral reaction of sadness, and you would look at the floor, like I had said, I used the C word or something. And then over the years, I'm like, right, he's producing me, and he's hiring me as a producer to go down that track. I think one of the things that makes this successful, both with our relationship with staff, and our relationship with our artists, is just acknowledgement. Okay. And so going to that Lions Club convention, what I wanted to show to you was the actualization of a vision, which is, let's get this ensemble up and running. And then once we do that, the Lions Club, their motto is we serve. They serve community selflessly. And so to synergize these youth with elders around the world, and to say this is an actualization of using arts to help bolster and help community. And so I think about, I don't know how many people were in the big band back then, 10, 12, something like that. Each of them has a brother and a sister and a mom and a father and a grandmother, and to see them all lit up, and then to see that energy spread through. And then because we are such a multifaceted, community here, to know that's in Pakistan, and know that's in the Philippines, people are watching, and people are like, can I see this? This is going through India. So you see this diligence towards an art form, and I'm very much like a martial artist, and like the rigidity of discipline and routine to make that manifest. Now, that particular concert was interesting, and this is something I recommend, is I wanted to rev the car a little bit. I wanted to see what my mind and what I could do with resources. And I also wanted to show you, I've been doing this to you for years, Steve, is I don't tell you things and then I want to mess with you so that you get shocked. I do it at every concert all the time. So to say like, hey, we're doing this Lions Club thing, and this is going to do this. It's a little bit of impish fun with you to do that. You can relate to this adage. I don't ask permission, you just go for it. And then to bring all these countries together. I think we had like 7 to 9 different countries on that stage. And that was exhaustive. It was exhaustive. I was playing 16, 18-hour days. But again, it's a lot of listening. It's a lot of acknowledgement of people and their cultures. And then you start putting all these people together. And then the ages disappear. I had a 6-year-old and a 75-year-old in the same West African drum ensemble. They're talking about music. And I think that's just really important as an aspect of art for us. You and I come from the first world European American common culture, where music and the arts is entertainment. And I really think, for me, knowing, ancestors' logic, world logic, how these art forms do heal and do help bring our community together. I think we did, especially after the pandemic, to have this collaboration and social aspect of this, I think is pivotal.
So that was obviously a really big project, and we both saw an opportunity there. And you don't get opportunity to perform for an international convention for the Lions Club. I don't know how many million members there are around the world, and you obviously, your connection being the president of the Altona's Lions Club for I think 4 years.
Yeah, 3 years.
3 years, a great achievement on its own. And thanks for everything you've done for the community.
Thank you.
And so from that point on, you and I got talking about potentially replicating and building more bands. And so this is kind of where the music industry pathways and the band program really eventuated. So let's talk about that. I want to get brass tacks here. In your own words.
I love that. It's so funny, all these little expressions that you don't realize don't go across the Atlantic.
Leon threw 5 of them before in the interview. It was incredible. Like, you definitely the language is definitely transforming.
Oh, that's fun. And I'm using pear-shaped. That's my new fun one. Yeah.
So yeah, let's talk about that, because this is the symbiotic relationship that I love, and it's you've been here, you've seen the history. We'll talk a bit about some of the, we're going to get exposed here behind the scenes. We really want to talk about how it's really been later in our interview. But now I want to talk about this partnership and how this has been, and talk us through some of the challenges and milestones throughout this last 4 years in building this program together. Let's start with, maybe let's talk about some of the personalities and the kind of managing expectations of band members. Let's start with that.
I was going to ask you, should we start with staff or should we start with band members? All right, let's start with band members. I think the first thing that we deal with is to realize that you're part of a team. And is that a corporate environment? Is that Navy SEALs? It doesn't matter. It's the same idea of a team. The same principles hold. I had a young artist here. I was observing a fellow producer last night. And, I'm supposed to be a fly on the wall. And so the producer asks, did everybody learn their parts? And this woman says, without shame, no. And so I stand up, low voice, I say, well, why? Oh, I don't know. And I go, do you want to be a professional musician? I don't know. Do you want to be a human being that works with other human beings? Yes. Well, then support the team. Get your parts together. Or you don't have a team. You're the weakest link. That's what I can see right now. So the basics is you've got to be able to, know your parts, know your music, all that kind of stuff. That's very important to the team. And the way that we've set this up is because it's peer pressure, it takes a lot of power off of us. They can triangulate reality. This is not my perspective as a producer. You need to get this together. You need to honor this. And that goes for any kind of team. I think the other thing is and I have this in my notes, and I have this just tattooed to my forehead. What's worse than love and hate? Those are emotions. We're still in a relationship. Not acknowledging one. That causes most wars, more than, love and hate. And so I'll say, okay, you are my guitarist, right? You're my piano player in the band. You're my drummer. You obviously are better at this instrument than I, and you must have ideas, and you must bring them forth. And I'll listen to you, and then I'll actualize your ideas. So now I have you in a team situation where you feel like you need to be accountable by peer pressure. And I'm acknowledging you, and when we play our songs and whatever, our arrangements, you've written that part. I now have you invested. So those are two of the larger tools I do for retention and to hold energy and stuff like that together.
Let's talk about, so what happens when someone says, or perhaps is not showing their level of investment and cooperation and not being a team player? Like, talk us through that, from a psychological management perspective, and what would you suggest people take away from that if they're potentially going through something similar? They're trying to put a band together, maybe for the first, second, 10th time. How do you manage those, those challenging friction moments where someone's not pulling their weight, and it potentially has the potential to disrupt and create this little, bad energy amongst the team.
Okay.
How do you deal with that?
There's a crossroads here in how we can talk about this. I want to offer advice to people out there that are running their own bands. And I also want to talk about how we do it in this institution. Let's talk about our institution, what our answer to that first, before I go on to advice to those trying to run their own bands. And not doing it through an institution like this and using this program, there's a lot of obstacles that you're going to run into where you're going to have to keep rediscovering the wheel that I think that we as Music Valley have kind of sorted. So I think the first one, when we have someone who's found wanting on their parts, is I deliver a short, sharp shock to them, and I do that publicly. And so I'll walk over and I'll stop and I'll be like, all right, who's found wanting here and not knowing their parts? And then I'll just go over and be like, it's self-evident we need to have this for next week, correct? I don't like to repeat myself. I don't do that. Do you understand? I'm pointing to my producer, did you hear it? The band leader, did you hear it? So now we have a triangulation upon this event. I'll see you next week. I don't care if you write it down. I don't care if you use your phone to remember to get part. I don't care if you get a tattoo. You have 7 days. Let's get back. Let's go. So what it is short, sharp shock.
Mm-hmm.
And then we move on. You don't want to linger there because you don't want to humiliate them. And you have to be careful of the physiology of the body. I say this to people who are married and stuff like that too. If you stay too heated and your chemical reactions flip around, now you're in a fight mode. You're not receiving the shock. I mean, you're not receiving, the energy. If you do that shock, their body goes unbalanced and then they're open. And then if you pour love and light into there, like, hey, it's okay, now you've got something.
Right.
Now, as I said, I don't repeat myself. Ironically, I just repeated myself. But then what we have is, again, with nurturing compassion, we're going to remove you from this band and we'll put you into what we have as a junior ensemble. Or we'll go even lower and go on one-on-one training. And I always think about like Sun Tzu, The Art of War, Chapter 1. I use it a lot, which is, to paraphrase, in front of an army, if someone's doing something wrong, you show publicly what happens to you, what are the consequences. And it lets all your other troops know this is what happens. Last week, we had a bass player in here who had, he's probably having a hard time with his life and stuff like that. You need to tell me about that. There was a lot of attitude in the ensemble to the point that I was like, this is beyond my scope of acceptance. Walk out the door. And then in the next session, their person was not there. And everybody knew. I mean, there wasn't blood on the floor, but there might as well should have been or could have been. And everybody was like, right, this is the caliber in which we deal with here.
So you're setting standards and you're showing people that you really are committed to upholding those standards.
I think a good analogy to use, and I say this to people, is this. I'm not your friend. And Miles Davis, if you get in the way of my band, I will run you over. Or I'll make you amazing to foot my band. But at the same time, I kind of, if I use a term that people could understand, I'd say I'm a dad. Okay, and you're a father, you understand that. I'm not your friend. I set the rules. I'll always have your back. You will never starve. But I'm not going to clear the way from you. You've got buddies, disposable buddies. I will always be here. But I am this rock. I have my standards. I have my ancestral teachings. I have my master's teachings. I have my methodology. And this is how this works.
So if I'm now starting a band, or, again, second or third or fourth band that I'm trying to start, and, maybe the previous band, the drummer left, or the singer had a relationship with the vocalist, and that went pear-shaped. I guess you're smiling because this is kind of stuff that you.
Oh, yeah, that's the story. It's not like a unique story. That's like
that's the story.
90% chance that's going to happen to you.
So we're not dealing with talent and skill anymore. We're dealing with the EQ. We're dealing with emotional intelligence and managing people, and like we kind of like to say, herding cats.
Yeah. Okay. So let's with kind of a impish joy. Let's talk about that. I tell people all the time. I'm a Berkeley grad. I'm proud of that. Well, I think when I was there, it had like a 93 or something % dropout rate. It was pretty intense. And That's not why I'm sitting in this chair with you. I'm sitting in this chair with you because I've studied my psychology. I've studied my philosophy. I've read, if you look at most religious texts, okay, and I don't care if you're into Muhammad or Buddha or Jesus or whatever, if you look at what they all have together, okay, other than, women are terrible or stone your neighbor on Thursday, look up, get away from all that. The similarity that they have is, how do I become a better human being? So now I take philosophy, psychology, and all of those texts, and I put them together into my mind. That mind frame is what makes this kind of job possible and successful. And so that's the first thing is, psych ops, in another word, public relations, empathy, caring about people. Now, relative to bands, it's so funny. There's a gentleman down at the grocery store. I see him all the time. And he's like, I got my band going and all this. And I'm like, you should come over to Music Valley. I'll assess you. We'll see where your talents are. We'll show you how to do leadership skills. We'll have you on stage probably in about 4 weeks. Okay? And I saw his eyes go wide. And I go, if you're not going to do that, I'll give you a bit of advice. I'll give you a crumb from Miles Davis. Don't form a band. Get your players together. Record your songs. By that time, half the players are gone. Oh, my girlfriend got pregnant. My foot hurts. I'm going to go into welding. Take the band photo. By the time you use it for the first time, all those players will be gone too. But now you have recording and you have some media content. Get a gig. That's what Miles Davis says. When you get a gig, suddenly musicians show up. When you say, hi, I'm going to rehearse in my basement for 4 months with delusions of grandeur, half a year down the pike, that's destined to fail. Now, I understand you people wanting to have creative voices in your own sound. I do. I'm a composer. I have my own ensemble. We do 90% original material. But what I really think is interesting and beautiful about what we're building here at Music Valley is, if you come under our program and you see how we have band leaders and we use WhatsApp and we have accountability and we have sessions going on and how we prepare for gigs and load-in times, we teach you the structure of how to actually do that. I don't want to get too religious, but as I told you, I jump different religious texts. Buddha has a great one, which is, you can either learn from the mouth of a master, or you can learn it through, causal experience. That could take years, could take lifetimes. You'll definitely get the lesson, but you can speed that up by listening or by experiencing. That's cool.
Cool. So we've pulled back the curtain a little bit to give people a view of what to expect if they're going to be putting together or managing or being part of a team, a band in this scenario. You've obviously helped deeply work closely with me in developing this program, and we have regular meetings. Every morning we're pretty much on the phone discussing, the way last night's rehearsal, behavior dynamics, and best next steps for us as a management organization, which is really what we're doing here. Okay. So as much as I love the idea that, our core focus has always been education and training and development, but it goes way beyond that. And so for those, considering what it really takes to really build something from the ground up, it is everything except talent and skill.
That's a great way to put it.
As a musician.
Yeah, well, almost with anything.
Yeah.
I mean, I really kind of look at the template that we're doing. I just happen to love music, like, deeply, okay? But you could put in painting, you could put in a corporate event, anything like that. These skill sets still apply. And I think that's important. As the people travel through here, I'm making them good musicians, very good musicians. But those skill sets will apply if they move to other things. I think the other thing that we've flipped around doing, and I got this from my Berkeley days learning theory, is they would be like, in order to have a piece of theory hit your heart so that you really memorize it, so that you've got it, they would have us compose pieces relative to the theoretical examples that we have. And then it gets embedded into your heart. And then the other one was, it would be Wednesday, we'd get a theoretical example, and they would say, like, okay, you need to compose a piece by Friday. And I would be like, okay, what if I'm not inspired? And he goes, well, then I'll give you a 0 and you'll go back to home to your little village up in New Hampshire and you're out of Boston, you're out of this college. Have a good day. And so now, instead of having, like back in the USM days, one-on-one lessons with a PDF, road to nowhere, the next page and all this, it now morphs into everything goes towards performance. I'll teach you, whole tone scale theory. I'll teach you 2-5-1s with tritone substitutions. I'll teach you the ragtime scale. I keep looking over at my friend as we do this because we're having a good of a time. But it all has to go towards performance. It all has to go towards a final product. And I think one of the things also that we've been doing is, okay, relative to this song and this theory, what are we expressing? What are we trying to say emotionally? So now you're using your theory towards an emotional expression relative to a performance where you're going to be on stage serving your community. That ties it all together as opposed to a one-on-one with the guy with gray hair in a little room on a piano.
I really want to unpack this because when you say performance, you're actually talking about not just the music live performance. We're talking about everything from the performance in showing up in a rehearsal, the performance in attitude, the performance in preparation, general performance.
There's 2 levels of that. There's the level that I have for the artists that we have here, and then there's the level that I have for staff. The level for artists, and it was really beautiful. I observed one of my fellow producers last night. It was really beautiful. I walked in at 7:31 intentionally, 1 minute, and all of the musicians were set up and ready to go. And I was very proud of that. So as soon as you walk in that door, go. There's a great thing Australia has. It might be a European thing. It's not an American thing, where they go 7:15 for a 7:30 start. You see it on all the things. And I was like, I'm going to adopt that. I think that's
Call times. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to adopt that. I think it's wonderful. I'm thinking about my fellow producer, Leon. When him and I hang out as friends, we're laughing and cajoling and telling your mama jokes and, just having a good time. When we walk in here, we are lethal. We still have love and joy. We have a good time. But what I tell people is this, is if your average musician is making $120 an hour, that means that person is $2 a minute. And then, so if I've got 10 people in a room, that's $20 a minute. So let's add in $4 an hour for me, say 3, I'm generous, long hours, and throw in 2 for the studio. So now I'm way up to almost $30 a minute. So I just spent $60 just telling you that paragraph. That's how much that time is valuable. And if we train the artists like that, then they will be ready for professional settings.
I love that. I think it's one of the best pieces of advice that and approaches that you have. And this brings me to the artist meets science, muso meets spreadsheets, numbers, and the real disparity in those 2 worlds. Because let's face it, as an artist, if you're in a studio, and I love this philosophy, and Rick Rubin goes for it. He's like, I'm not finished until I know it's done. Right? There's no time limit to it, and I love that. But you also set a frame around that, and you use it in such a way to measure your progress. To know you have to have a measurement, and I guess setting a standard against something that really, it's one of the most effective ways to show someone that your time is valuable is that there's a market, there's a rate, everything has a cost. And when you're really introducing that into a private institution or an organization like Music Valley, I think it hits home a lot harder than, say, a government-funded institution where taxpayers are funding your time, and good luck to you, and whatever happens from this point on is out of our control. And in saying that, so I love that, and I want you to now tell everyone, based on your experience, how that's been for you in terms of the staff and being able to relate those principles and those teachings to measuring performance for staff. Because you've been in that seat of the bus now for probably a good 2 years, and I think Leon was probably your first, mentee or trainee that came on board a few years ago. So walk us through let's talk about the real challenges that you see and the friction that you've encountered over the years when staff and musicians come into an environment like this? Let's start with that, actually.
Okay. And that's a lot to unpack. And I think the first thing we do is we kind of look at the artist and say, are they receptive to, when I say the word malleable, just so you know, I know there's has a stigma of psychological manipulation. The true definition, the 19th century and before definition, is just to change matter. Okay? So we look at the malleability of an artist coming in. And I'll preface this comment, this paragraph I'm going to say, based on Metallica. Everybody sees Metallica with the guitar and the death, right? Well, every morning at 10 a.m., those guys gather up for a business meeting, and they pull out the spreadsheets, and they pull out the calculators, and they figure things out. Looking at the Rolling Stones, you're actually considered like a member of the band for a certain pay rate and certain kinds of things. And I forgot what member it is, but there's some member that's been there 20 years who's still not a member. He's one of the outsides. And I think it walks through a process. I remember when I first came here, my first day, there was a drum instructor here. And he had on the shorts and the flip-flops and the dirty T-shirt. And I could just smell the bong water coming off this guy. And I was like, that's not what we're doing here. And so I lead by Buddhist example. You come dressed, you come sharp. I had a gentleman in his 30s a year ago. I was like, I want to be you. And I go, okay. You get up at 8 o'clock in the morning. You do your push-ups, your sit-ups. You go through your correspondence. You have your nutritious food. You get your practice in on your instrument. You go through this routine. You check your correspondence. You crunch your numbers. You do your networking with others. There's all of these aspects of the business side. I was just talking to a woman this morning, and she's like, how to win friends and influence people. She goes, that's where you got that from. And I go, yes. And so I think as a corporate being who has as his subject music and the arts, but can I sit down, I do it a lot internationally, can I sit down with CEOs and talk about, supply lines and business issues and personnel issues and, the dangers of HR and all that? Yeah. And I think that's one thing that's missing is the perceived casualness of an artist versus the discipline and the diligence and the consistency of that kind of mind frame cuts the line between a hobbyist and someone who's getting things accomplished.
So if there's one or two, maybe say one character trait that sits above all of those common denominators that separates the ones that just survive and the ones that thrive in a place like this, having seen the history over the last 7 years, what is that character trait, would you say?
Collaborative spirit, ability to take critique.
Gotcha.
I think those are the big ones. And there was a man when I first got here, I was still wet behind the ears and, just nervous in your presence and being here and overwhelmed. This guy pulled me aside and he goes, just so you know, if you don't contribute ideas and have visions on how this place can move and you can actualize, you won't last long here. This is a dynamic place. And it was a real eye-opener for me because I'm used to, you go to Harvard, they're like, okay, you're in the dance department, you're a registered artist, you compose for this. We don't want to hear your ideas. We want you to do the job that we've assigned for you. Oh, I have ideas for growth. That's not what you're hired for. And so what's happening is my entire skill set isn't being used. And I say this with joy to you. I love throwing ideas, and you're like, yeah, nah. And to double back on what you say on the phone conversations that we have during the day, I look at you now as talking as I get a break from my spreadsheets and my computer and my email. I get to walk in the garden. I talk visions with you, but they're pragmatic visions. We both know each other's worth, several dollars a minute. So we're like, bang, 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 bang. Here's the idea. Thanks. But I think it's that kind of teamwork, that collaborative communication. That's really important.
So you've been involved in mentoring Leon, others, Gene as well. How does that remind you of your own journey? Like, surely you've obviously had mentors in the past. How does it remind you now being on the opposite side of that table?
I I almost want to cry a little bit. It reminds me of Dwight Graves. It reminds me of Barbara Levy. These are my teachers that are ancestors. And it reminds me of being a young pup. And what they did was they saw me and they acknowledged me. And I would actually, this is the old days, now I feel old, but I would bring like tobacco and wine or alcohol to their house and drive to their house and be like, I have a question for you. And they would take the gifts and they'd be like, bang. And sometimes these guys were CEOs, president of the MIT Corporation.
Yeah.
Sometimes these are the woman who helped do the buy transfer for AOL and Time Warner merger. It's one of the biggest financial mergers in corporate history.
Right.
Taught at Harvard now. I would see her.
Right.
And then I would go to my friend down the dirt road who taught me how to walk on fire, or how to skin a djembe, and ask him these questions. So I did a lot of that. And what they showed me was support, acknowledgement, and just really clear, not advice as much as ways of thinking about things. I think one of the fun ones was, two questions I asked Dwight. I asked him a question once, and he said, you need to go sit in the desert for 3 weeks. Chaco Canyon. And then next time I saw him, I said, I have a question for you. And I drove, and he's like, did you go to Chaco Canyon yet? And I said, no. And he goes, well, I'll see you around. So I couldn't get any more advice out of this man until I went to Chaco Canyon and sat in the desert doing nothing, like just sitting in the desert for 3 weeks. That's like, it's years. And then that question got answered. So did a zillion other questions.
So you did?
Oh, yes. Yes. If someone gives you advice and you don't take the advice, you're wasting time.
At what point, how old were you?
I was 26, 27, just before, during my Saturn return.
Okay.
So that was a pivotal one. And then the other thing that I cherish as advice was, I see you're at the crossroads of two things here, and you're having a hard time making a decision. Well, if they're that close, don't worry about it. Both are going to be okay. Don't stress about it so much. Take one of the pathways. I think one of the biggest things that you can kind of mess up on is inaction. They say as CEOs of some of the larger top, Fortune 500 companies, they make, 400 to 600 decisions in a day, and their success rate might be about, say, 90%, 89%, depending on the day. That means guaranteed 10% of their decisions are wrong every day. But they got off the couch and they executed. Deliberate slowly, execute quickly once you have an answer.
That speaks volumes, especially for those musicians who may be waiting for the stars to align before the next big release, or the next podcast that they've been talking about launching. I love that. I love that approach. And what I want to really sort of go back to now, Martin, is we've talked a lot about the spreadsheet effect. So I want you to take us
like this one.
Before
this is
spreadsheets. Tell us about Martin managing things and music and life before spreadsheets, and then maybe the moment that you were introduced to spreadsheets and the power of spreadsheets, and now where you are. Just give us a summary of that journey.
This is slightly embarrassing. In retrospect, it's slightly embarrassing. I'll quote Sun Tzu again. The first thing is to control the self. And if you can control yourself, then you can control one other man. Then you can control a troop grouping. Then you can control 100 li. So the idea is to have self-control first before you can move that on to another. And so this idea of spreadsheets, just for public knowledge, before I worked with Steve Jazz, I don't think I'd ever used a spreadsheet in my life. And what happened, and this is what I highly recommend that you understand, and this is the gift that you gave me. Describe to me a color that you've never seen. You can't. It's beyond your ability to perceive. But if somebody says to you, I'm as passionate about music, check out this color that you don't even know that you want it. You don't even know you need it. And so you're like, look, here's a methodology on how to deal with people. Here's a spreadsheet so you can lay everything out. From now on, what we're doing is we're giving a numerical analysis to all things, including positivity towards, collaboration, all of these metrics. And so then if you can, use the numerical system, you can define, and then you can sort of have a conversation. These are all the colors that I hadn't seen. And I think it's really important for, even now, Steve, I know there's colors I haven't seen. Even now, but before this interview, I was saying I've got this new book on the way. And then you and we had a thing going on for Christmas where it was like, okay, here's some colors you haven't seen so we can get on the same wavelength. I think it's important to still stay being a scholar and to still stay, keeping the inner child there. But I think it's also important to see how new technologies and new systems are working to help us. We're talking about AI earlier, and my intuition was reticence. And I know that's the death knell, and I need not to think that way. What's nice about having you as my colleague is a great quote. I know and can do everything I store it in other people. So what I do is you go on, run. And then I can call you and be like, look, with love and light, can you fill me in on your perspective? And you're like, yes. Don't look at this. Do this. Curate. Great. Thank you. And so I think that's also really important, just to realize you don't have to be a one-man show, but you do need to be collaborative and to listen.
Yeah, it's a really pertinent point. I was talking to Leon about this, and we talked a lot about being afraid to ask and being perceived as inadequate or incapable, and that shattered perception the moment he asked, and he told me that he couldn't do a particular event or hire the configuration of the studio, and then how my response totally just transformed and shattered that belief that I would attack him for it or make him feel less than what he is. And then he briefly mentioned how he had this conversation where the first time he had to check in on you and your standards, the mentee becomes the mentor. Almost.
Oh, this is when he took on the HR role.
Yeah.
Oh, that was fun. Yeah, I saw him nervous, and I was like, it's because I'm old enough to be his dad, and I've been mentoring him and all this, and I saw him looking at me, and I wasn't nice to him. I was like, bring it. And but he was clear.
And I think this is what you're saying. Like, initially you mentioned that those that not just survive but thrive are the ones that have this collaborative spirit and are able to give and receive feedback.
Massively.
So we've seen that over the years. You've seen a lot of colleagues come and go over the years. If there's one thing that you want to share with people that are considering, joining in an organization or in, some kind of team environment, or they might have already started within a team, whether it be a band, music institution like Music Valley or anything else, what would you say to them right now?
Okay. Personally, I would say as the big piece of advice is stay consistent. Stay consistent to your routine or your rituals. I feel like everything has a house. So I have my physical exercise house. I have my practicing house. I have my financial house. And so I make sure that all of these houses are taken care of. My own ship is taken care of. My educational house, my romantic house, my intellectual house as far as breathing in new knowledge. Identify these houses and stay consistent. There's a great quote, I think I can't remember who it's from, where it says, stay orderly and bland in your routine so you can be violently crazy in your work. If you have that kind of a structure going on, then you can go insane inside of that because all of the boxes there are ticked. I think the other thing is relative to collaboration. What is it? The Strait of Hormuz, is that how you pronounce it? I was reading about it today, and this just happened yesterday, where there's the ships coming through, and the ship starts veering a little bit off path. So the Iranians come over and start shooting bullets at the ship. And they're like, oh, we're being attacked. And no, the Iranians are saying, we planted mines here. We're letting you pass through this strait, but you got a little too close. And since there's an English barrier or a language barrier, bullets are really effective at making sure you stay on the right way. I know I'm an American. We like our toot, toot, toot. But what I'm saying is relative to like ensemble work and collaborative work, you set the tone. I'm thinking about, it happens maybe, once a fortnight, once a month, where you've got to set the tone to the other people in the room. And the last time I did this, I sat down all my ensemble and I said, this is the standard that we adhere by. And if you let anything like that slide, if you don't show them where the things are, if you don't shoot the bullets off, you start, kind of wandering and stuff like this. I think it's really important. I am your dad/producer. One of the things I see that I have to work on a lot when I'm training producers or band leaders is they try to be buddy and friendly like that. And that's not the deal. I am concrete. I am marble. War marble, I love you, but you're not going to be able to manipulate or move things around.
I think it's a really big one, Martin. I've seen that over the years, onboarding new staff and trying to be everyone's friend, because it's, kind of what they're used to, and coming out of high school and in uni, we're still friends, and then all of a sudden someone shafts them because there's a better gig, and then they realize, oh, this is actually about money and professionalism and agreements and a lot of other things, not just being friends with people. So yeah, I think just to summarize that, I 100% agree, being able to stand. I think it's also being before we go to do things. Obviously, all doing comes from being. So being the leader and stepping in and giving yourself permission to really just stay still and firm in your approach and what you believe is best for the team is probably the most important first step that anyone can take.
You have to set the tone. Once you've lost the room, it's hard to come back. Okay, so the first thing that I do is I walk in, my whole body language changes, my voice changes. A stepfather of mine, he trained the state police on how to shoot, and he also trained them with a little bit of psychological operations. And one of the things he said to me was to use the commanding voice. Ma'am, please step outside of the car. Well, you're going to stop everything you're doing because you've got the commanding voice. So in our rehearsals, I will use the commanding voice. And it's a delicate balance. Oh, you have an idea for a song. I want to hear your idea. I'm not your friend right there. I didn't ask you how your day was and your feelings. I'm asking for your input. Then I'll accept it from there. So it's that balance of creating space so that they feel safe to throw ideas,
but knowing who's in charge.
And every once in a while, someone will get passionate in rehearsals, and they'll get in my face about something. There was 3 years ago, I think, or 2 years ago, where I was wrong on this passage on this song. And this vocalist kept saying, excuse me, can I interrupt? I'm like, no. Excuse me. And I'm like, what? And she's like, you screwed up these two measures. We actually do this turnaround Dakota. And I stopped the whole rehearsal, and we applauded her. And I said, you see what she did? She respectfully got in my face, stood her ground, because what she wanted, what is best for the song. That's a producer right there. So then they see that, and they're like, oh, so I can kind of come back at something like this. Not about emotions or attitudes about it, but relative to the artwork to make it better. And that's a really delicate balance to be able to get all that going on. But if you lose it at the gate, being your friends, how are you doing? How's you feeling? I don't really care right now. I'll ask you if it's affecting the art.
I think one of the worst rituals or habits you can get into is, hey, how's your week?
No. Not at $35 a minute. I don't care how your week is.
As much as this is probably what you're used to, in your own training or your own experience, it's really not setting the standard for anyone.
No.
So I love your approach. I think a lot of people listening to this can take a lot away in terms of their approach and what they're doing, whether they're leading, coaching, producing, managing.
I think what's really important to talk about here is because I've worked with Grammy nominees, Grammy award-winning people. I've worked all around the world. What we're trying to do here, our intent here, is to help people navigate all of this stuff. We haven't, and you know me, I love music theory. You know what I mean?
Love to geek out, especially you and Leon. Just
yeah,
geeking out before.
Right. Come in, we're talking tritone substitution. He's giving me some new voicings from Bill Evans. That has no place in this podcast almost. It's not relevant to the conversation. I was good at stuff at 22. Well, 22, I was Let's see, working at McDonald's, digging trenches, pureeing food for people who had no teeth. These are all jobs I had with a Berkeley degree. I had to get my mind together on the other aspects in order to be the man you're looking at today.
So really, Martin, like what we're saying here is, I think that we have to grow up in the aspects that are away from our skills and our talents in music. And to do that, not being afraid to ask for help, seeking mentorship, seeking the right structure and guidance and environment. And this is one thing that I think, after many years of running this institution and working alongside you, I've seen come back again and again. Environment. Who do you spend your time with? Because this is a very direct, controllable aspect in your life. And I know that, as a father of 3 kids, I can see the environment that my kids are being brought up in is way different than the environment I went through. And it's definitely shaping their thoughts, their feelings, their vision, and beliefs right from the onset. So I think, would you agree that if there's one aspect that someone listening on this episode has to take right now to really shift that reality and just grow up, and get to that next level of perhaps being more of a commander, what is that one first next step for them?
Okay. There's a bunch to unpack there, because this is the web that I've seen. It pulls down a bunch of people. Let's talk about who you surround yourself with in that oscillation. There's 2 quotes that I have. One is, as you look into the abyss looks into you. So if you have this idea of being this high-level artist and you're hanging out with people who don't have that work ethic, who don't have that drive, who don't have that lust and that discipline, that's not going to bode you well, because you're the smartest person in the room with all this energy. It's nice when you're able to have what I call a positive feedback loop. You and I have that. So I'm excited. I talk to you. You're excited. Now I'm elevated. I get off the phone with you almost daily, and I'm like, you, right on, man. Right on. You know what I mean? And we're digging it. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing also is there's a great quote, avoid civilians. So if we look at, spirit warriors as musicians, and we look at non-musicians as civilians, and that's fine. I say to avoid civilians, in other words, those people who have normal jobs for, not because they love them, because they want the security or the finance or all that. Those people can and will destroy your dreams. And they'll tell you can't go for it. And there's also, I never heard the term before. It is very prevalent in Australia, this tall poppy syndrome. So in other words, it's funny, if you could see all the colleagues here in the studio, the fellow Aussies, everybody just nodded just a little bit. It's not a culture I come from. I'm a one where we build people up. But you have to wrestle with that too. And you have to believe in yourself. And so you get the right people around you. And I think there was something that I saw the other day that I thought was really beautiful, is they say cultured, actualized people are ruthless with their access and their time.
100%.
And that's where I'm at. I'm ruthless with my access to me and with my time. If I have a weekend where I can be in silence, either in nature or hanging out with my cat in meditations, that's a great weekend. And then I'm qualitative in who I spend time with and who I listen to. I don't want that energy to drag me down. And it's always trite when people say there's 2 types of people. But to use the 2 types of people analogy, selflessly, I wish you so well, you and your family in your trials and tribulations, and I'm rooting for you. That's who you want around you. I'm praying for you. You're in my thoughts and my meditations. You can look up physics. All of this stuff is starting to actualize. And then you have those other people that are like, I'm fine with my Netflix, just sitting here on the couch, drinking on Friday and Saturday night with my friends. I'm fine until I look at you and I realize what I could do. And that just angers the hell out of me. So if I hurt you and bring you down to my level, then I can normalize this
It's
existence.
really a disease.
Watch out for those people.
Absolutely, 100%. This is really good. I love this because there's so much to unpack there. I don't want to go into it too much, but I think the main takeaway is surround yourself with winners, team players, people who can give and receive feedback, and find that place, find your tribe.
Yeah, I think during these conversations, we'll have several wormholes that we can kind of seek in deeper,
100%. One last question. What's the vision? What do you see yourself in the next 3 years?
Oh, God, I want to make a joke so bad about me being like on the top of a pyramid with the women throwing grapes at me. That's what first came to mind.
Yeah.
All right, so let's look at the question again. Where do I see myself in 3 to 5 years? More expensive sunglasses, plane tickets. My vision, Steve, I feel like what we're doing here is an anomaly, okay? And I think it's healing a lot of people, and it's tying into our community, and it's bringing ancestral knowledge, and it's bringing a cultural knowledge just about music alone. Who is Sly and the Family Stone? Who are the Rolling Stones? Who is Cat Stevens? These are the questions these people are asking. I'm like, let's find out. And we're making sure that we can breathe them in. My fantasy is that this seed, this thing that we're building here, we can franchise and move through the world. So people can use this as a way to use the art to heal their community, to heal their youth, and everybody. We have some people here that are in their 50s and 60s now. We have some that are 6 and 7. And I want to help be part of that happening. So that's the plane ticket. Me landing in Perth or Sydney or Paris or whatever, being like, all right, let's have an intensive and how we set things up. And the nice thing, there'll be lots of questions as far as like, how do we actualize this? And I'll be like, well, I've been with Steve in Music Valley now for 22 years. We have our psych manual, our operations manual that answers all of these questions. We're on standby. And if my legacy, and our legacy, if I can be so forward, is that we have, we've gone to the mountaintop. We've licked the toad. We've done the ancestral work. We've read the business acumen, the gestalt of the times. And ever since, the Industrial Revolution on, we've absorbed all this and synthesized this in a way that future generations who aren't going to read it, they're not going to check that out. They'll take our curated, methodology and hopefully actualize that. That's my hope for the future.
Awesome. Been a pleasure talking to you. Life,
Always giving
business.
Thanks, man. And just remember what I say to you, and I'm just going to go over for a second. Just remember what I say to you on every single invoice. I think people need to stay consistent and they need to stay humble. I have walked, the other day I walked past 4 Lamborghinis on my way to work. Okay? And then 2 weeks later, I'm walking into a public community center to help people who have dementia problems with djembes. Stay humble. The world will put you in the right place to serve. So just be humble on what you're doing. Stay consistent with humbling. And be grateful to have the opportunity of service, to be able to use your art, to be able to work and to serve in that way.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Giving thanks.
Giving thanks, man.
Thanks for tuning in. If today's conversation sparks something in you, drop a review or send this to a person in the industry who you think needs to hear it. And if you're someone who's done playing small and ready to take your music or career to the next level, we'd love to talk. There's a link in the show notes to book a call with us. Let's explore how we can help you plan your next move and reach your goals faster. But most importantly, if you're listening to this right now, I want you to know I hear you, I see you, I appreciate you, and my team and I believe in you. With the right environment and the right team in your corner, anything is possible. I can't wait to see you again inside the Valley.